Jack had always considered himself an ordinary guy. Living in a quiet suburban neighborhood, his life was predictable: school, work, a few friends, and an occasional weekend hike. Nothing ever seemed to shake up his routine. That was until he met her, the alien girl. It was a rainy afternoon when Jack decided to take a hike in the forest near his home. The weather was less than perfect, but something about the deep, misty woods always called to him. He trudged along the trail, unaware that his life was about to change forever. As he rounded a bend in the path, Jack stumbled upon someone, lying on the ground. A woman? No, it wasn't possible. She was unlike anyone Jack had ever seen. Her skin shimmered with an iridescent glow, a deep purple hue that seemed to shift with the light. Her long, flowing hair was a mixture of silver and blue, catching the rain as it fell in glistening strands. Her eyes, though, those eyes were what struck him the most. They glowed a brilliant yellow like two suns, full of wisdom and mystery. She lay motionless on the forest floor, her breathing shallow, her body covered in strange markings Jack couldn't recognize. His first instinct was to run, to turn around, and head back to safety, but something kept him rooted to the spot. It wasn't fear, it was something else, something more compelling. It was as if she were calling him to her, drawing him in with an invisible pull. "Are you okay?" Jack whispered, cautiously approaching her. She stirred, and for a moment Jack thought he might have imagined it. But then, her eyes flickered open, locking onto his. She didn't speak immediately. She just stared at him, and in those glowing eyes Jack saw something ancient, something beyond his understanding. "Who are you?" Jack asked, his voice trembling, though he didn't know why. The alien girl slowly sat up, her movements graceful, even despite her apparent injury. Her voice, when it came, was soft and melodic, like a song from another world. "I am Solara, of the Alexian race," she said. "I come from a far-off star system, a place where beings like me are not so different from humans, but our abilities are much greater." Jack took a step back, still unsure if he should believe any of this. An alien? From another star system? It sounded insane, but looking at her, feeling the weight of the situation, Jack couldn't deny that something extraordinary was happening right in front of him. "I know this is hard to believe," Solara continued, "but I need your help. My ship was damaged, and I have been stranded here for days." She winced, and Jack saw the faintest trace of blood at her side. Her injury was more than just a scrape, it looked deep, possibly even life-threatening. Without thinking, Jack knelt beside her, his hands trembling as he reached out to help. "You're hurt. Let me take you to a hospital." "No," she replied, shaking her head slowly. "My people's technology doesn't allow for such simple healing. It would be better if you helped me in another way." Jack was completely confused now. "What do you mean?" Solara's yellow eyes fixed on him, and for the first time she smiled, though it was a strange, almost sorrowful smile. "I will give you something in return for your kindness, something that will change your life forever." Before Jack could react, she reached into the folds of her robe and produced a small vial filled with a glowing, iridescent liquid. It seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly energy, swirling and pulsing as though it had a life of its own. "Drink this," she said, holding the vial out to him. "It is my gift to you, a gift that will awaken powers beyond your imagination. But it will not come without consequences." Jack hesitated. There was no way he could drink something like this. But then again, what was he supposed to do? Here, he was, talking to an alien, helping her out of pure instinct. Maybe this was the universe's way of telling him he was destined for something greater. Maybe this was his moment to prove he wasn't just an ordinary guy. He glanced back at Solara. She seemed calm, serene even, as if she knew something he didn't. Jack's curiosity finally outweighed his fear. He reached for the vial, his fingers brushing against her soft skin as he took it from her hand. Without another word, he uncorked the vial and drank the liquid in one swift motion. The effect was immediate. As soon as the liquid touched his lips, a jolt of pure energy shot through his body. His heart raced and his muscles tensed as though they had been suddenly infused with an incredible strength. His senses sharpened to an unbelievable degree. He could hear the distant rustle of leaves, the soft thudding of his heart in his chest, and even the subtle hum of energy around him. He felt like he could run faster than ever before, or maybe even fly. The power surged through him, overwhelming him with its intensity. But then, just as quickly as it had come, the rush of energy began to subside, leaving Jack feeling dizzy and disoriented. His body felt lighter, as if it were made of something more than flesh and bone. He could feel a new force inside him, a force that was powerful yet strange. Then, just as Jack thought he might collapse, a sharp, awkward sensation hit him. His body twisted in an unnatural way, as though something inside him was trying to break free. It was uncomfortable, more than uncomfortable, and Jack couldn't figure out what was happening. "What's happening to me?" he gasped, gripping his chest. But Solara only watched him with a quiet smile on her face. "The powers come with consequences," she said softly. "You will learn to control them, but not without difficulty." Jack wanted to speak, but all that came out was a strangled gasp. The room seemed to spin, and he realized in that moment that his life was never going to be the same again. Jack's body throbbed with an unfamiliar energy. It had been hours since he drank the alien milk, but the after effects were still surging through him, wild and uncontrollable. He was sitting on the forest floor, his hands gripping the earth beneath him as if it could somehow ground him, as though he could stop the strange force pulsing through his veins. His breathing was shallow, his chest rising and falling erratically. His mind was a storm of confusion. What had he done? What was happening to him? The world around him seemed sharper, clearer. He could hear the soft rustling of the leaves in the trees, the distant chirping of birds, and the rhythmic pounding of his own heartbeat. Everything was heightened. Every sound, every movement, even the scent of damp earth and wet foliage was vivid, overwhelming. Solara had watched him from a distance, her eyes calm as always, her expression unreadable. She had not tried to explain further, not yet. She simply observed as Jack tried to process the changes happening to his body. Why is this happening?" Jack muttered, his voice hoarse. His hands trembled as he looked at them. There was a strange, almost electric energy dancing across his skin, as if his body were alive with power he couldn't control. Solara stepped closer, her eyes still glowing with an otherworldly light. "You have been given a gift, Jack. A power. From my world. But such gifts come with their own trials." Jack shook his head. "I don't want this. I didn't ask for this power." The frustration in his voice only seemed to intensify the strange force building inside him. He clenched his fists, and without meaning to, his body jerked forward, a burst of energy exploding from his hands. Trees shook in their roots as a shockwave reverberated through the forest, knocking a few large branches loose. Jack gasped in horror. "What did I just do?" "Control," Solara said softly, her voice a mixture of warning and calm. "You must learn control. Your power is not yet fully awakened. It will take time." But Jack wasn't listening. Panic was rising in him. This wasn't just strength or speed. This was something else entirely. It felt as though the very fabric of the universe was at his fingertips. He could feel the power deep within him threatening to spill over. It was so raw, so uncontrollable. "Help me," Jack pleaded, his voice shaking. "I don't know how to stop this." Solara approached, her gaze steady and unwavering. "You must find your center, Jack. You must learn to quiet your mind, to control your emotions. The power feeds on them, on fear, anger, and stress. If you let them guide you, they will consume you." Jack's heart pounded in his chest, the adrenaline of the situation only adding to the storm inside him. "How do you do it? How do you control it?" he asked desperately. Solara paused before answering, her eyes softening. "I was born with this power. It is a part of who I am, but even I must keep it in check. It is not easy, but it is the only way to survive." Jack was silent, his mind racing. He could feel the energy growing inside him again, a deep, seething power. It wasn't just his physical body that was affected. His thoughts were clearer than ever, but they were full of violent impulses. He could see the power in his hands, pulsing like a living thing, and every time he looked at it, it felt like it was pulling him deeper into itself. Jack. Solara's voice cut through his thoughts. You must calm yourself. Focus. Breathe. Jack closed his eyes, trying to steady his breathing, but it was hard. His pulse was racing, and every part of him felt like it was vibrating with excess energy. He took a deep breath, attempting to center himself, but as he did, something snapped. The power inside him surged again, this time stronger than before. His hands shot out involuntarily, and the ground beneath him cracked, sending a shockwave through the earth. This time, Jack didn't pull back. Instead, he stared in awe at the destruction he had caused. The trees around him had been uprooted. The earth was scorched, and the sky above seemed to flicker with a strange, unnatural energy. Why can't I stop it? He breathed, his voice a mix of awe and fear. You can, Solara said gently, stepping closer. But you must let go of the fear. You are afraid of the power, and that is why it overwhelms you. Embrace it. But do not let it control you. Her words were calming, but Jack's anxiety was far from over. The more he tried to focus, the more he felt like he was losing control. His mind raced. Images of destruction flashing through his thoughts, visions of the chaos he could cause if he lost control completely. And then it happened. Jack's body convulsed, and the energy inside him began to grow even more erratic, surging through his chest like a storm. For a brief moment he felt as though he was slipping away, as if the power had become more than just a part of him. It had become him. And in that moment, he was no longer Jack. He was something else. Something far more dangerous. No! He cried out, slamming his fist into the ground. The earth cracked beneath his hands, and the force sent shockwaves through the forest once again. But this time, something shifted. The energy inside him began to calm, settling like a storm that had finally passed. Slowly, he opened his eyes, breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling with each desperate gasp. He was sweating, his body aching, but there was a strange clarity in his mind now. I did it, Jack whispered to himself. I controlled it. Solara stood by, watching him carefully, her expression unreadable. It is only the beginning, Jack. But you have taken the first step. Jack looked up at her, the weight of his powers still hanging heavy in his chest. He had no idea what was to come, but he knew one thing. He couldn't go back now. This power was a part of him, and whether he liked it or not, it was a force he would have to learn to live with. Jack had no idea what had just happened. One moment, he was in control, the power inside him finally tamed. But the next moment, everything spiraled out of his grasp again. He had taken the first step, but the journey ahead was far more dangerous than he ever imagined. The energy surged through him with a life of its own, an unstoppable force that neither he nor Solara could fully contain. It wasn't just power. This was something darker, something that pulsed and whispered in his mind. The feeling was suffocating, as though every cell in his body was being ripped apart and then put back together. Jack, focus. Solara's voice cut through the haze in his mind, but it was too late. He could barely hear her now, the power drowning everything else. His hands trembled as they shot out, and before he knew it, the ground beneath him cracked open. The trees around him uprooted as though they were mere toys. He tried to stop, tried to regain control, but it was as if the energy had a mind of its own, clawing at him, pushing him further into chaos. Jack's eyes widened in horror as the force of the power ripped through the forest, sending debris flying. He felt a brief moment of panic. He could feel the destruction building, uncontrollable, devastating. He was losing himself. Solara stood, at a distance, watching in disbelief as Jack's power intensified. "Jack," she shouted, but her voice was drowned out by the chaos that raged around them. In that moment, Jack's mind flashed back to the first time he had consumed the alien, milk. He had been offered a gift, a chance to become something greater than human. But he hadn't understood the cost. He hadn't realized that the power came with consequences. Consequences that were now crashing down on him like a tidal wave. Then, without warning, the sound of sirens cut through the chaos. The sharp, shrill wail of approaching vehicles sent a jolt of fear through Jack's chest. He turned toward the sound and his stomach dropped. In the distance, a fleet of government vehicles sped toward them, their lights flashing, their engines roaring. They had found him. Solara, they're coming, Jack shouted, but his voice was barely audible over the deafening noise around them. The agents who had been tracking Solara and now him were getting closer. He could see the menacing black SUVs approaching, their armored windows reflecting the chaos he had created. "Run!" Solara shouted, and her voice broke through the noise, like a crack of lightning. Without thinking, Jack grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the dense trees. His heart raced as he felt the agents closing in. He didn't want to be captured. He didn't want to be a weapon in their hands. But as they fled, the energy inside him flared up again, a surge of panic mixing with the raw power inside him. The earth cracked beneath his feet as he ran, sending shockwaves through the ground. "Jack!" Solara cried out as they bolted deeper into the forest. "Control it!" But Jack couldn't control it. The more they ran, the more the power seemed to swell inside him, pushing him forward, making his body move faster and faster until it felt like he was flying through the forest. The trees whipped by him like shadows, the world a blur. And then with a deafening roar, the ground beneath him shattered. The shockwave of his power sent the trees flying in every direction. Rocks exploded from the earth, and the sky itself seemed to tremble. The force of it knocked Solara to the ground, and Jack stumbled, barely able to keep his footing. The agents were still coming, but now the land between them was a battlefield of destruction. "Get up, Jack," Solara shouted, struggling to rise to her feet. She was shaking, but the fear in her eyes was clear. "We don't have much time." But Jack couldn't hear her. He was too lost in the chaos, too overwhelmed by the power that was now out of his control. He felt as though he was no longer himself. The human side of him was fading, replaced by something far darker, far more dangerous. And then, without warning, the agents were upon them. They had reached the edge of the forest, and now, the heavy vehicles blocked their path. A dozen armed soldiers wearing black tactical gear stepped out of the SUVs. They pointed their guns at Jack and Solara, their eyes cold and calculating. "Step away from her," one of the agents shouted. His voice was sharp, commanding. Jack's heart raced, and the fear of being captured pushed him even further into the chaos. His hands trembled, and the power surged again. This time, it wasn't a simple burst of energy. It was a tidal wave of force, a wave that rippled out from him in all directions. He saw the agents freeze as the air around them distorted, as if something was warping the very fabric of reality itself. The power exploded from his body. With a roar, the ground cracked open, and the shockwave sent the agents flying, their bodies flung backward like rag dolls. The vehicles were tossed aside, their metal frames crumpling like paper. Jack's vision blurred, the world spinning as he struggled to stay on his feet. In the chaos, Jack caught a glimpse of Solara, struggling to keep her balance. She reached for him, her eyes wide with fear. "Jack, stop! You'll destroy everything!" But Jack didn't hear her. He was lost in the storm inside him, and nothing else mattered. The world around him had become nothing but a blur of destruction. Suddenly, as quickly as it had come, the power surged to a stop. Jack collapsed to his knees, his body exhausted and drained. The destruction around him was immense. The agents were lying unconscious on the ground, their vehicles destroyed, the forest torn apart. Solara stumbled to his side, her hands on his shoulders as she steadied him. "You've done it," she said, her voice soft but urgent. "But now you've made them aware of you. You can't. Keep running, Jack. They will come for you again." Jack looked up at her, his face pale, his breathing shallow. He had just crossed a line that he could never go back from. The night after the chaos was unlike any Jack had ever experienced. The aftermath of his uncontrolled power weighed heavily on him, physically, mentally, and emotionally. As he lay on the cold, wet ground, his body sore and bruised from the exertion, all he could think about was how close he had come to losing everything. His powers, once a gift, had become a burden, something uncontrollable that threatened to destroy everything in its path. Solara had stayed by his side, her silent presence a comfort, yet she didn't have the answers Jack was looking for. No one had warned him about the true cost of the power he had gained. No one had told him about the consequences, the destruction, the fear, the chaos. And worst of all, no one had told him that, in the end, he might not be able to control it. But it wasn't just his body that had been destroyed. The world he knew, the life he once took for granted was gone. The government had seen the devastation he had caused, and they were coming for him. Jack had no doubt that they would stop at nothing to capture him, to turn him into a weapon. And in the back of his mind, he knew it wasn't just the government he had to worry about. His own fear and self-doubt had become just as dangerous as the power he wielded. Jack sat up slowly, his fingers grazing the wet soil beneath him. The cool night air felt refreshing, though it didn't calm the storm inside him. He looked over at Solara, who was standing a few feet away, her glowing yellow eyes watching him with a sense of quiet understanding. "Solara," Jack whispered, his voice hoarse. "I don't know what to do anymore. I've caused so much damage. I can't go on like this." Solara walked over to him, her steps light and graceful, almost as if she were floating rather than walking. She knelt down beside him, her eyes soft with empathy. "You're not the only one who has been through this, Jack," she said gently. "When I first discovered my abilities, I, too, struggled with them. I thought I was losing control, but in time I learned that true strength doesn't come from the power itself. It comes from within." Jack looked at her, confused. "Within? But how can I control something like this? How can I control the power that feels like it could destroy everything?" Solara placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly warm, despite her otherworldly nature. "You must accept it, Jack. You must stop running from it. The more you fear your power, the more it will control you. But when you accept it, when you stop fighting it, you can use it for good. Your power is not your enemy. It is part of you." Jack stared at her, absorbing her words. He had never considered that. His entire life, he had tried to avoid anything that felt uncontrollable, whether it was his emotions or his power. He had always been afraid of losing control, afraid of what would happen if he let himself embrace what he was becoming. But Solara was right. The more he fought his powers, the more they consumed him. It was time to stop running. Jack stood up, his body shaking with the effort, and took a deep breath. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel the power within him, not as something dangerous, but as something that was now a part of him. The energy that coursed through his veins wasn't something to fear. It was something to understand, to control. "I think I understand," Jack said softly, the weight of his words settling in. "I can't fight this. I have to use it. I have to make it mine." Solara nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Exactly. And when you embrace it, you will find that it is no longer a burden, but a strength. Not just a strength to defeat your enemies, but a strength to protect those who need it." Jack closed his eyes, taking a deep, steadying breath. He could feel the power inside him, alive, pulsing. But this time, instead of overwhelming him, it was calm. It was controlled. It was a part of him, not something separate. He raised his hands, focusing, concentrating on the energy within. At first, the power swirled erratically, but then it began to align with his thoughts. The chaos inside him settled into a steady rhythm like the calm after a storm. "I can do this," Jack whispered, his voice more confident now. He looked at Solara, and for the first time he saw a glimmer of pride in her eyes. "Yes, you can," she replied, but their peace was short-lived. In the distance, the sound of approaching helicopters broke the silence. The government agents had arrived. They were closing in on their location, and they wouldn't stop until they had Jack. Jack turned toward the sound, his expression hardening. He knew what he had to do. He had come to terms with his powers, and now he was ready to use them. He couldn't run anymore. The time for hiding was over. "I'm not going to let them take me," Jack said, his voice strong, unwavering. Solara stood by him, her eyes bright with encouragement. "You don't have to run anymore. You have the strength to fight back." Jack nodded, his mind clear, his heart steady. The power inside him was no longer something he feared. It was something he had learned to control. And now, he was ready to use it. As the helicopters grew louder, Jack raised his hand and focused on the energy within him. The air around him hummed with power, and the ground beneath him trembled. He could feel the pull of the energy as it surged through his body, ready to be unleashed. This time, when the power erupted, it wasn't a chaotic explosion. It was controlled, focused, and deadly. With a single gesture, the energy shot out in a powerful beam, striking the helicopters and sending them spiraling out of control. The agents on the ground scattered, fear and confusion overtaking them. Jack had become the weapon he had once feared, but now he was in control. As the dust settled and the echoes of the battle faded away, Jack looked down at his hands, the power still pulsing within him. He had found his strength, not just in his abilities, but in his ability to control them, to use them for a greater good. The fear had faded, replaced by a new sense of purpose. He was no longer just a man with alien powers. He was a protector, a hero. And with that realization, Jack knew that his journey had only just begun.